O'Brien shifted uncomfortably in the center chair of the Defiant. It wasn't that he had never taken command of the ship before, but he had never done so when Captain Sisko was standing at his side. Commander Arla was at the flight operations console. Beyond her, on the Defiant's main viewer, Deep Space Nine was a distant, sparkling smear of jeweled radiance against the translucent lavender plasma wisps of the Denorius belt. The captain addressed O'Brien. "Relax, Chief. Worf is standing by at Ops. If anything even looks like it's about to go wrong, you can have a full crew beamed on board in less than a minute. Are the tactical sensors reconfigured?" "As best as they can be. I'd say 10 hours for the full sensor sweep. Maybe another hour for the computer to finish the comparison between the Cardassian schematics and the scan results. If there are any more hidden rooms in there, we'll definitely find them." "Very good, Chief. Now, I'm wondering if while we're conducting the station scan, you can look for something else that's gone missing. Quark." "Captain, are you sure Quark's even on the station?" "That's what I'm hoping you will tell me. Do you think you can do it?" O'Brien nodded, his head already filling with a list of the adjustments he'd have to make to the sensor scan rates. "Carry on, Chief. Sisko to Worf. 1 to beam out." It was soon after, in the relative calm of the wardroom, that Captain Sisko accepted the pad that the leader of the Cardassian mission gave him. "I am Liege Terrell, and these are our credentials." The excitement of the unannounced arrival of these 3 Cardassians on a neutral cruiser had finally lessened throughout the station, but the security concerns remained. According to the pad, Liege Terrell was the widow of a minor trade diplomat from Cardassia Prime. Her technical specialist, Dr. Freyam Batan, was a physician retired from the Cardassian home battalions, and her associate, Atrig, of no specified job function, was a businessman who ran an import-export company among the Cardassian colony worlds. Sisko, however, didn't believe a word of the dossiers. For a diplomat's wife, Terrell was too clearly used to giving orders, not practicing diplomacy. Dr. Batan was too young to have retired from anything, and Atrig, perhaps the most striking Cardassian Sisko had ever seen, had not lost his hair nor been so badly scarred at the base of his neck and across one of his wide shoulder membranes, ferrying goods from one world to another. Atrig had been in battle. Decked out though they were with false identities, innocuous civilian outfits, and singularly hollow smiles, Sisko had no doubt he was seated across the table from 3 very active and dangerous Cardassian soldiers. Sisko placed the pad on the table as if it held nothing of interest or of value for him. "So, you are traveling under the guise of a humanitarian mission?" Terrell smiled. "Not under the guise. We are a humanitarian mission, accepted by both the Federation and the Dominion during this terrible conflict. We are merely here to repatriate the remains of the unfortunate Cardassians you discovered fused within the hull of this station. The dead were not soldiers. Their identification files are in the pad as well. You will see that they were civilian support staff for the Terok Nor mining operation, low level. Of course, they worked for the military in trying to restore order to Bajor, and if we had not brought order to these people, our closest neighbors in space after all, when we did, Bajor would be a wasteland today." Sisko clenched and unclenched his hands. "Parts of Bajor are a wasteland today because of what you and your occupation forces did to it." Terrell smiled with infuriating condescension. "And we regret that. If you could only know how it pained us whenever we had to discipline these people." Sisko could hear his heart thundering in his ears. He wanted nothing more than to end this meeting and escape from Terrell's presence. "I can only surmise that the Amber Star has made some error, and so we will not be able to release the bodies until a more detailed analysis is completed." Terrell was on her feet at once. "Captain Sisko, do not turn this into a diplomatic incident. You are making a mistake." Sisko turned his back on the Cardassians and walked to the doors. The Sagittarian cruiser is departing tomorrow at 1500 hours. You will be leaving with it. Cardassians, Sisko thought. Cardassians back on DS9. 2 murdered Cardassians from 6 years ago, perhaps from the very same day Quark, Odo, and Garrick could not remember. 1 murdered Andorian from 4 days ago, Quark missing, smugglers everywhere, counterfeit orbs, and... Where is the pattern? Sisko asked himself. He could envision all the separate pieces swirling around like tiny runabouts tossed by the negative energy flux of the wormhole. Yet he couldn't help but feel that somehow, in some way, all those pieces should fit together. If not among themselves, then around some missing final piece. Suddenly he saw Kira's compact form hurrying toward him. "What is it, Major?" "It's O'Brien, sir. He has to see you. He's found something with the scan. All he'll say is that it's something that just shouldn't be." After Sisko had transported back to the Defiant, he had gone to the bridge. On the main viewer, O'Brien was pointing to a small red dot that flashed in the lower section of the 3-dimensional wireframe schematic of Deep Space Nine. "There, Captain. That's the hidden stretch of corridor with the holosuite, the one Jake and Nog found." Sisko watched as another pulsing light joined the first on the screen, a few decks higher. "What about that one, Chief? Is that the water recycling plant?" "Yes, sir. That's the one I called Major Kira about. That's the part that just shouldn't be there. According to the tactical sensor sweep I've conducted, DS9's water treatment facility no longer exists. Somehow, and don't ask me how, it's turned into a large, empty room. And that's why the red light's flashing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but if the water plant had truly disappeared, shouldn't we know about it?" "Oh, we'd know about it. We'd have 1,000 calls in from the habitat ring about no running water. So, someone's got to be running a sensor mask in the treatment facility." "In other words, Chief, that's where Quark is." "Frankly, Captain, there could be 100 Jem'Hadar hiding behind that thing and we'd be the last to know about it." That was all Sisko needed to hear. "Mr. Worf, we have a probable target. Prepare transporter suppression fields and arm the anesthetine dispensers." Sisko recited the coordinates of the water treatment facility, then told Worf, "The Chief and I will beam to Ops. We'll leave from there with a full security team." Commander Arla looked up from her station. "Excuse me, you're leaving me here?" Sisko didn't glance at the Bajoran commander as he replied. "Regulations don't permit me to completely abandon a ship. All you have to do is sit. As soon as we're finished on the station, I'll have a crew beamed out." "Status, Mr. Worf?" "Anesthetine systems are online. I am now reconfiguring the interior security fields to..." Sisko hit his communicator twice to reset it, and got nothing. Even as O'Brien scrambled to the Defiant's tactical station, it took only seconds for Sisko to see that all of DS9's communications arrays were dead. The Chief didn't take his eyes off the madly flashing tactical displays. "Massive power fluctuations. I'd say we're looking at a total computer failure. There's not a single automated system operating on the station." "Chief, this is not a coincidence. Worf was just adjusting the security fields. They were waiting for us to make our move. And if the station's computer has been infected by a programming virus, the Defiant's computers might be vulnerable too." With O'Brien at his side, Sisko transformed the Defiant into little more than an inert chunk of dead mass within 2 minutes. O'Brien turned to the captain. "Now what?" "Now we're beaming directly to the water plant, or at least to the edge of that sensor mask. Commander Arla, you have the con. I suggest you sit back and enjoy the ride." Then Sisko headed at double speed for the main doors and O'Brien followed just as quickly. "Set the coordinates for beaming over, Chief. I'll get the phasers." O'Brien called out as he entered coordinates on the console. "Not rifles. None of the pipes in the water plant is shielded. Take hand phasers and don't set them for anything higher than Force 3. Otherwise, one miss and we'll all be swimming. The light faded to reveal a dark corridor, ribbed and ringed by Cardassian struts. Sisko and O'Brien had returned to Deep Space Nine. The deck was slanted by 4 or 5 degrees. O'Brien turned to Sisko. "The station's gone to emergency gravity." He looked at the closed doors to the water treatment facility. "At least we won't drown. I hope." Sisko frowned. "Sisko to Worf." No response. There was no time to waste. Sisko moved cautiously along the slanted corridor to the edge of the oversized water plant doors. He tapped the door control. An overwhelming stench of raw sewage enveloped them. O'Brien coughed. "Must have been quite a spill when the gravity generator switched over to the backups." Sisko led the way into the huge facility. It was 3 decks high, filled with a maze of pipes, metal vats, and overhead walkways. Abruptly, O'Brien pointed up to the left. "Captain, over there." Sisko saw what appeared to be a silver flower that had sprouted on the top of a 5-meter-tall vat of dull, copper-colored metal. It was perhaps a meter across, with 3 pulsing blue lights on the tip of each of its 5 gleaming petals. It was the sensor mask. It was not Cardassian technology. Neither was it Starfleet. O'Brien took aim with his phaser. Then an object flashed through the air. O'Brien grunted as something hit his arm and his phaser went flying. Sisko pulled him into the shelter of an immense pipe and examined his arm. The sleeve of O'Brien's black jumpsuit was wet with blood, where a slender gold dagger impaled the chief's forearm. Sweat mingled with tears of pain on O'Brien's cheeks. "It's going numb." Sisko knew at once the blade had to have been coated with some type of poison. The engineer's head slumped forward, eyes closed. Filled with furious purpose, Sisko leapt to his feet, edged around the pipe until he could just see the silver blossom of the sensor mask emitter against the dark edge of the vat. He swung out and fired. Then he ducked behind the pipe as a dagger clanged against it. The sensor mask was down. Sisko leaned back against the pipe, tried his communicator again. No response. Suddenly, the thick odor of sewage intensified. A gout of dark water was spraying from the top edge of the vat where the sensor mask emitter had been. His phaser blast had obviously punctured the vat wall. In a vain attempt to shield himself from the terrible smell, Sisko pulled the neck of his duty shirt up over his mouth and his nose. He had to keep going. With the emitter gone, Sisko was able to use his tricorder. There were 2 life signs 20 meters ahead. What he found wasn't surprising. Quark, in chains, hanging head down over an open collection tank filled to the brim with dark, bubbling sludge. Quark's hands were tied behind his back, and thick black wires were cruelly clipped to the edges of his prodigious ears. The only way Sisko was able to tell that the Ferengi was even alive was because the tricorder said he was. Sisko checked the reading again. One of the 2 life signs had disappeared. Pain seared Sisko's back as he was thrown forward to the slippery deck, his phaser and tricorder both tumbling away. Sisko rolled to his feet to face an Andorian female, 3 meters away, crouched in fight-ready position, the stark blue tendrils of her antennae jutting from her distinctive blue-white Vulcan short hair. In one blue hand, she held a golden dagger like the one that had injured O'Brien. His attacker was one of the 2 sisters Odo had been watching. Sisko slapped his hand down to a second phaser, ripped it from its holster strips, and fired point blank. She collapsed at his feet. Then he started for Quark, whose mouth was moving at warp 10 but saying nothing Sisko could hear. Sisko whirled around just in time to be thrown against the sludge tank as the second Andorian sister's hand stabbed at his neck. She launched herself at Sisko before he had a chance to regain his balance. A spinning high kick struck Sisko's shoulder, knocking him back against the edge of the sludge tank. Sisko summoned all his strength to fling his arm up, splashing raw sewage in her eyes. As she shrank back from him, her eyes clawed at her face. Then she threw herself at him. Instinctively, Sisko tucked and rolled toward her, forcing contact before she had anticipated. As her foot slammed into his ribs, He looked up and saw her flailing form flip over him and land in the sewage tank. Quark maniacally spun and sputtered. "Calm down, Quark. I'll get you down." Quark screamed something indecipherable. The Ferengi was shaking and swinging back and forth on his chains, clearly panicked by something. With a sudden flash of alarm, Sisko turned about. A moment too late. A black shape enveloped him like a tidal wave sinking a ship, and the roar of the room fell away into silence as he drowned in a sea of darkness. Quark shuddered as Sisko collapsed on the filthy deck of the water plant room. He had absolutely no idea who it was who had struck Sisko down. He hung motionless in his chains. Sisko's murderer was heading toward him, toward the sludge vat above which he dangled helpless, headfirst, and beside which Sator now lay, recovering her breath after climbing out of the vat. Of the two sisters, Quark remembered thinking when he had first met them that Sator was the cute one. The chance to feel 4 female Andorian hands on his lobes at the same time had always been a little fantasy of his. But then Dal Nortran had gone and got himself killed and spoiled everything. He'd had to avoid the sisters instead of cultivating them. Before long, Odo had him in protective custody, and then had arrested him, only to let him go just in time to be waylaid by that miserable excuse for a Ferengi, Base. And all to be dragged down here to meet Sator and Lean again. Base. The name should have warned him. The little insect had come into Quark's back office and launched into his oh-so-sincere sales pitch about how he wanted to protect his investment in the orbs, how he wanted to make sure Quark stayed safe before, during, and after the auction. He told Quark he would be safe behind a sensor mask where no one could find him. And worst of all, in Quark's recollection, was that the entire deal had been negotiated in front of his own idiot brother. Base had set the whole thing up so that when Quark disappeared, Rom would dim-wittedly think that was part of the plan and would not be concerned. No one would be concerned. Quark had willingly gone along until Base brought him to the water plant room, and the 4 female Andorian hands went to work on him in a terrible travesty of his fantasy. Quark saw the black-suited figure below draw a small phaser. The figure dispatched Sator, and then Lean. Then the black figure looked at Quark, adjusted the small phaser's setting, and took careful aim. The shooter's beam was aimed at the chain that bound his feet. Quark dropped straight into the bubbling vat of... A strong hand grabbed Quark just before he hit the liquid sewage. The figure in black deposited him on the deck, right beside the motionless body of poor Captain Sisko. Quark opened his mouth and let loose with a string of invective. "I don't care who the grieve you are. If you're going to shoot me like the rest of them, go ahead. Kill me and be done with it." The figure in black pulled off his breather mask. But the murderer wasn't male. He was a female. Vash. "Quark, is that any way to talk to your new partner?" She snapped her breather back into place, then motioned for Quark to follow her. But there was something Quark had to do first. He reached down and got a good grip on Captain Sisko's jacket to drag the unconscious human toward an open metal staircase beside the sludge vat. "I don't get it, Quark. What did he ever do for you?" She'd never understand, thought Quark. Yet he could feel her suspicion, and he could almost hear her thinking, how could she trust someone who went out of his way to help a Starfleet officer? Quark wearily cupped a hand to his mouth and yelled ahead to her, "He owes me money!" In the dimly lit kitchen at the back of his bar, Vash ordered, "Stay still and keep your eyes closed." Quark did as he was told. He was suddenly engulfed in a thick foam. When his face felt free of bubbles, he risked opening one eye, then the other. He realized with delight that the dreadful stench of the raw sewage was gone. "What is that foam?" Vash leaned back against an inductor stove with a sigh. "A cleansing agent from Troyes. Their pheromonal systems are so volatile, they need something that will break down all organic waste completely and instantly." Vash opened the door leading to the main-level room of the bar. Chairs were overturned as if customers had run out of the bar in a hurry. Vash explained it. Sator and Lean slipped a programming worm into the station's computer system. Until the worm detected someone setting up security screens around the water plant, trying to contain the area, the worm was dormant. The bad news is, once it was triggered, it reproduced so quickly it used up all available processing space. All the automatic systems locked up. The good news is, there's no permanent harm done. DS9 should be up and running in about 10 minutes or so. Vash suddenly became tense. Is someone at the bar? Just Morn, sleeping like a baby. A great, big, wrinkled, prune-faced baby. Quark, wake him up and get him out of here. We have business to conduct. Quark stood defensively in front of his first, best, and most treasured customer. I'm sorry, but even I have to draw the line somewhere. If Morn wants to sleep in my bar, well then, may the divine treasurer bless him and keep him solvent for all the days of his life. If you want to discuss business, we can do it down there. What kind of business did my favorite archaeologist have in mind? Quark winced as Vash leaned over the bar and pinched one of his earlobes, painfully. Quark, I'm talking about the red orbs of Jalvador. You made it clear you were ready to deal. That's why I saved your wrinkled Ferengi butt. Ow! Vash suddenly yanked up on his earlobe. Vash! It's not that easy. I'm just the middleman. The goods are with a third party. Vash narrowed her eyes. Who? Dal Nortran, the Andorian who came here with Shader and Lean. Those heartless females were his bodyguards, and they killed him. Vash snorted. Bodyguards don't kill their clients. It tends to cut into repeat business. Quark was outraged. They sold me out to Shader and Lean. Vash dug into her carryall, slammed a spindle-shaped chunk of dark crystal on the bar, and announced, a red orb of Jalvador. Quark could scarcely draw a breath. You mean they are real? This one is, but without the other two, it's worse than useless. So time's up, Quark. I want the map. A commotion behind Vash made Quark's heart flutter like a grubworm on a toothpick. Sator hissed. You mean this one? Vash wheeled around, phaser already in her hand, and aimed behind her. But the danger was above her, not behind. Sator and Lean were on the bar's second level, and the golden dagger Lean now threw down knocked the phaser directly out of Vash's hand. Instantly, Sator flipped over the railing to land like a feline in a crouch. Lean slid halfway down the stairway railing to the main level, a golden dagger in each hand. Sator held up a slender cylinder of amber crystal. We have the map, Vash. Without it, your orb is nothing more than a sparkly rock. Let us buy it from you. Vash was breathing hard, weaponless. Without an orb, your map might as well be a Ferengi ear probe. Let me buy the map from you. Quark saw his opportunity and acted upon it immediately. Ladies, please. What better situation could there be for striking a deal? Lean's bare blue arm flexed, and a golden dagger flashed through the air to pin Quark's too large jacket, with him inside it, to the wall. Sator and Lean moved to flank Vash. Vash's eyes moved quickly from one to the other. The Ferengi is right. We can work out a deal. Sator sneered. Dal Nortran wanted to work out a deal, and then the Ferengi killed him. Quark protested. I didn't kill anyone. Vash countered Sator. If your sisters didn't kill Nortran, and the Ferengi didn't, then who did? Sator glanced sharply at her sister. We don't care who killed him. But now, we do things our way, and we want your orb. The three of them faced each other, drenched in sweat, ready to fight to the death. Quark trembled, took a calming breath. He was falling in love, and he didn't care with which one. Suddenly, Base jumped from behind the bar, waving aloft a comically puny bat'leth. I'll take both. Sator turned. What are you? Your worst nightmare, Blue Cheeks. Lean suddenly threw both daggers at the minute Ferengi. To Quark's utter astonishment, Base twisted his bat'leth in an expert blur and deflected both daggers. Vash spat at Base. You backstabbing little Hardenack. You're supposed to be working for me. Lean snarled. We paid him off so he'd work for us. Base shrugged his shoulders. What can I tell you, halfwits? I'm pure Ferengi, in it for the profit and nothing else. Vash got to Base first, knocking him straight off the bar to the deck. Sator and Lean attacked him from behind. Quark watched in disbelief as Base swung the bat'leth wildly at Lean until he provoked her sufficiently to reach out to swat it away. At that precise moment of contact with Base's weapon, the blue Andorian flew back in a shimmering nimbus of disruptive neural energy. All Base seemed to need to do to cause havoc was make contact between the blade and any part of his opponent's body, and Ferengi plasma whip circuits did the rest. After vanquishing Sator and Vash, so they too collapsed in the throes of neural disruption, Base sprang back up onto the bar. He swaggered toward Quark. Quark tugged at his jacket where its shoulder was still fixed to the wall by Lean's dagger. Base? Can't we talk about this? The little Ferengi spun his bat'leth around his wrist, then raised his weapon. The orb is mine. The map is mine. For the first time in my life, Base wins. I don't think so, you miserable scrap of sentient being. For a moment, Base stopped in mid-stride, and then Quark and Base both slowly turned to look at the person who had uttered those words. Morn. The hulking Lurian was on his feet. Quark's mouth dropped open in awe and respect. Not only was Morn his best customer, he was about to senselessly sacrifice his life in a tragic and doomed attempt to save him. As tiny Base raised his bat'leth for the attack, Morn swung up his huge arm and it snaked out along the bar like golden lightning until Morn's immense hand closed on the bat'leth and crushed it. As Base gargled helplessly in Morn's unforgiving grip, Quark recovered his senses. Odo! You enjoyed that, didn't you? Seeing me almost killed. As a matter of fact, I did. Whatever else is going on around here, and I assure you I did hear everything, Dal Nortron's still dead. And if you didn't kill him, and the Andorians didn't kill him, then there's still a murderer walking free on DS9. Quark threw up his hands. Finding murderers is not my job. Fortunately, Quark, it happens to be mine, and in this case, I think my job has just become much simpler. Quark saw where Odo was looking. Directly at the red orb of Jalvador. After 5 cold restarts, Dax's computer team still wasn't rid of whatever type of binary code Sator and Lean had input into DS9's computers. The litter on the carpeted sections of the deck was a sad reminder of the hasty evacuation of all non-essential station personnel into the habitat ring. Sisko now headed for the security office to join the others assembling there. Halfway between the turbo lift and the security office, Sisko turned to see Bashir striding quickly along the corridor toward him. Doctor, how is the chief? Despite every other threat to the station, O'Brien was his first priority. Worf and his security team had been beamed into the water plant the moment the transporter systems had finally been manually tuned. They'd found Sisko just coming to, and O'Brien unconscious. Sisko had given the order to evacuate the wounded chief to the infirmary. Bashir's report offered more mystery. Interestingly enough, there was another Andorian toxin on the dagger that hit him. Not the same one Vash used on herself, but one intended to incapacitate almost any species. But it's not fatal. At least, not to Miles. He's too stubborn. The doctor glanced around at the unsettling state of the promenade as they walked towards Odo's office. I suppose you've already thought about this, but what happens if the Dominion hears about our condition? Sisko had thought about that. Admiral Ross has already dispatched the Bandar and the Garneau to provide us support. They'll stand up to anything the Dominion can throw at us. They reached the doors of the security office and stepped through. To save what was left of his hearing, Sisko issued an immediate command.
Be quiet! Everyone!
Sisko turned brusquely to Quark. Where's the orb, and where's the map? Quark led Sisko and Bashir to the other side of the constable's office. On a table was a spindle-cut chunk of what appeared to be randomly faceted red glass and a small amber cylinder. All the orbs of the prophets Sisko had seen resembled shimmering hourglass shapes of solid light. He picked up the faceted artifact to examine it more closely. It doesn't look like an orb, Quark explained. Word has it, it's only supposed to glow when it's close to the next orb. There's supposed to be 3. You use one to find the next one, then use those 2 to find the third. Sisko touched the edge of the artifact, sensed no trace of the prophets. And how much were you going to make by allowing this travesty of the Bajoran religion to take place? Captain Sisko, I swear I had no idea the orb was real. I thought I was going to be selling just the map. Sisko held up the amber map cylinder. Tell me about this. Quark shrugged. I never saw it till Dal Nortron brought it to the bar the day he arrived to arrange an auction for the map. What's it a map of, Quark? Quark sighed dramatically. According to the Jalvador legend, the 3 red orbs were scattered so they could never be brought together. Whoever hid them made a map. Dal Nortron obtained, from whatever source, a map that apparently reveals the world on which the second red orb is hidden. You need the first orb to find the second. They react to each other, like a location beacon or something. Sisko handed the map cylinder to Odo. Constable, is there any way we can see what's on this? Odo studied the transparent amber rod.
Looks like a standard Cardassian memory rod.
He walked over to a wall display, pressed a control, and a rod holder slid out. On the display screen appeared a map, but not an entire planet. Instead, it outlined a city layout of streets and dwelling blocks. Odo studied the schematics on the display screen.
Maybe the legend was wrong. Instead of showing a world, the map shows a place on a world.
Sisko tried a different approach. Even if this map is a copy, and if it truly dates back to 10,000 years ago when the first orbs started to appear, the Bajorans didn't have space travel, so the orbs had to have been hidden on Bajor itself. In any case, the mystery that should concern us right now is who killed Dal Nortron. Hey, Dad. Sisko turned, automatically smiling at the sound of his son's voice. Jake stepped cautiously into Odo's security office, hoping to find out what was going on. Jake, you know you shouldn't be here. I want you back at our quarters. Jake nodded without protest, but just before stepping out, he glanced up at the display screen. Hey! You got the interface with the Cardassian holosuite going. Everyone looked at him in surprise, including his father. Jake pointed to the display screen. It sure looks like the layout of the village Noggin I saw, the one on the Bajoran moon. Just for a moment, Sisko felt Deep Space Nine wheel crazily around him. He suddenly was certain that the last piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. And the truly maddening thing was, it had been there all along. Jake studied the holographic image that surrounded him and all the other onlookers in the holosuite at Quark's. As far as he could tell, it was a close reproduction of the primitive village he and Nog had seen in the distance 4 days ago, when they had entered the Cardassian holosuite. He looked over at his father, secretly pleased to be able to make an important contribution to the investigation. His father turned to Odo. Constable? Theories?
I think it's obvious, Captain. Dal Nortron somehow knew about the Cardassian holosuite in the hidden section of the corridor. He used it to create a simulation of this Bajoran lunar village, no doubt attempting to narrow down the location of the second orb. The map is recorded on a Cardassian memory rod. That implies Nortron obtained it from a Cardassian source, And that it was a Cardassian who knew about what was hidden on Terok Nor and then told Nortrin.
Major Kira returned from a walk through the simulated village. This reconstruction doesn't match any village on any of the inhabited Bajoran moons. It's a fake. Captain, we're wasting our time. Sisko held up his hand. Just a minute, Major. Let's accept that this simulation doesn't match an existing lunar village. But could it match an ancient one? Lunar villages aren't that ancient, sir. The oldest ones would only be 1,000 years old. Forgive me, Major. Rather than ancient, let's say old. Could this represent an old lunar village? Kira turned around to stare back at the simulation. Well, the architecture is right, but if the red orbs are supposed to have been split up 10,000 years ago, how could one of them have been buried on a Bajoran moon 1,000 years ago? Sisko turned to his son. Jake, I wish we knew what moon this was supposed to be. Computer, add Bajor to the night sky, as seen from the Bajoran moon of Barado. Jake looked up as the purple sky suddenly rippled and turned black. A few moments later, a full Bajor appeared against the stars. Nog shook his head. Too small. It was twice that size at least. Sisko gave the challenge to Kira. Major, is there any moon that orbits the planet even closer? Kira shook her head. Not habitable. Sisko's smile was triumphant. You mean not habitable now? Jake didn't know what his father was talking about, but Kira apparently did. Gerardo? Gerardo was only converted to an energy source 5 years ago, not 1,000. Jake had a sudden flash of inspiration. Which means someone could have hidden the orb on Gerardo 5 years ago, to keep it out of the hands of whoever's been trying to find the orbs and bring them together. Kira turned to Sisko. That orb will never be found because it either doesn't exist, or if it does, because it's hidden on Gerardo. Either way, the map means nothing. No one offered an objection to Kira's conclusion, so neither did Jake. Sisko sighed. Computer, end program. But nothing changed. The simulation remained. Then, something unusual happened. Jake was amazed to see the distant landscape shimmer as 3 Cardassians, 1 female and 2 males, including one who was bald and badly scarred, stepped through the holographic simulation to join the group in the holosuite. Each held a Cardassian phaser. The female smiled. Thank you, Captain Sisko. You finally found our missing orb. Quark demanded of Terrell. How'd you get in here? I demand to see your admittance receipt. Terrell stared at the indignant Quark. You don't recognize me? Should I? Terrell turned her attention to Odo. How about you, shape-shifter?
What about me?
Terrell casually lifted her phaser and shot Odo point-blank to stun him. Sisko told Terrell, You had no need to do that. You'd be surprised, Captain. Whenever Odo permits himself to be captured, I can't help but be suspicious. Terrell spoke as if she knew Odo. That meant to Sisko that it was possible that she had been on DS9 during the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. Terrell approached the captain. We've been listening to everything you've discussed in here. You've been so caught up in the search for the real story about the orbs that you've completely neglected the greater truth, emissary. You're familiar with the orbs the Bajorans call the Tears of the Prophets? Those blue orbs come from the celestial temple Jalvador, the wormhole. So where do you think the red orbs come from? Terrell answered herself without even waiting for Sisko to respond. They come from another wormhole. Jadzia's expression was of disbelief. There can't be two. The entire Bajoran sector's been subjected to one of the most intensive subspace structural analyses the Federation has ever undertaken. There is no second wormhole. The Cardassian sneered at Jadzia. I don't suppose that thorough analysis of yours included the effects of the 3 orbs of Jalvador? Kira cried out, You're lying! There is only one celestial temple, and the prophets are those who dwell within it. Without even glancing at her target, Terrell swept out her arm and smashed her phaser across Kira's face. Spare me the superstitious prattle, Bajoran. Your prophets are exploitive aliens, and they've treated your world like their own personal chessboard for 20 millennia. Kira launched herself at Terrell, her hands her only weapons. But Atrig, the bald Cardassian, stunned Kira with his phaser. Kira collapsed instantly. Dr. Baton then ordered, "The rest of you get down on your knees, with your hands on your heads." Knowing his people had to be his first priority, Sisko knelt on the stones beneath the night sky and the brilliance of a full Bajor, and he placed his hands on his head. The others immediately followed the example of their commander. Terrell looked pleased at his compliance. "You and I are alike, you know. You've seen the blue orbs. You've contacted the wormhole aliens. But do you know one of the things that distinguishes a red orb from a blue, other than the color, of course?" Sisko remained silent as before. "Verteron traces, Captain. That's what gives the red orb its color. A subspace particle collision that traps chromic oxide atoms in a solidified energy vortex." The sound of her voice rattling on while Major Kira lay untended not a meter away made Sisko's head ache. How soon would it be before Worf would wonder why the meeting in the holosuite was taking so long? Not actually solidified energy, of course, but one with a relativistic rate of temporal decay 1 billion times slower than the local inertial frame of reference. Am I boring you, Captain? You'll never be able to leave this station, Terrell. My people built this station. We know more about it than you ever will. Captain, I studied the red orb right here on this station. That single red orb had Verteron traces different from those of the blue orbs. There was no doubt the red one had been close to an opening wormhole many times. With that red orb connected to the right equipment, I was able to release just enough of the solidified energy trapped within it. What I am saying, Captain Sisko, is that I was the first to create a wormhole precursor field. Sisko's arms dropped to his side. Are you saying you made contact with the prophets? Terrell gestured with a phaser. Wormhole aliens. Not face to face, but oh, they were in there. Some of us could hear their thoughts, an alien race reaching into our minds, knowing our deepest desires. The Cardassian looked away from him, up to the holographic image of Bajor in the simulated night sky. But even knowing what we were dealing with, there were those on my research team who heard the aliens' voices and obeyed them, stepping through the precursor membrane. Most never came back. We were so close to finally controlling the red orb's energy when the order came to withdraw from Bajor. Terrell paused for a moment, idly rubbed her thumb against the force selector switch on her phaser. Captain, you're an intelligent being. The ability to open an artificial, stable wormhole between any 2 points in the galaxy, perhaps in the universe, would be the ultimate defense against aggression. Cardassian fleets could take off from Cardassia Prime and, in minutes, be in the atmosphere of any enemy's home world, having completely bypassed all that world's defenses. In a day, the Dominion would cease to exist. In a week, the Alpha and Beta Quadrants would begin an era of peace unsurpassed in galactic history. Terrell now crouched down beside him. You see, I know what drives humans to join Starfleet. I even know what you are, Captain. You're an explorer, a dreamer, someone who needs to propel his species beyond all limits of knowledge. In other words, you are just like me, like any other Cardassian. Terrell stood up again. The one thing that held back my work was the fact that I had only one red orb. After all, Bajoran legends say that the doorway to Jalvador shall be opened only when all three are brought together. But in 60 years, the entire might of Cardassia could only locate one of those three, until Quark so helpfully announced that he had a map to sell. So with the chance to find a second red orb, which could possibly provide the means to recover the orb lost on the day of withdrawal, it was time for me to return to my old home, to wrest from the 3 red orbs the secret of creating a translocatable wormhole. And then, finally, to destroy the aliens within it so its full power will be in the hands of the greatest force for galactic peace ever imagined. Computer end program. With Terrell's order to end the holosuite program, the reconstruction of the Jeradon Lunar village began to dissolve. The familiar hardness of the holosuite's smooth deck replaced the rough stones previously beneath Sisko's knees. The lighting brightened. In the green glow from the standby holo projectors, the 3 Cardassians resembled supernatural beings emerging from some alien pit. But all Sisko was conscious of was that at last he knew what Terrell's weakness was. You lost an orb. I prefer to think of it as misplaced. She turned her attention to Jake. The lost Cardassian holosuite leads me to believe that the red orb is nearby. Your son wasn't in a holosuite. He was looking at visions of what he wanted most, created by the wormhole aliens to lure him into their realm. Sisko looked up at Terrell. I know the questions you need answered. Let the others go. And you'll tell me everything I want to know? Yes. Once I know my son and the rest of my people are safe. Terrell motioned Sisko to rise to his feet. Computer. Run Odo Ital 1. At once, the holosuite became a duplicate of the station's security office. She gestured to Atrig and Dr. Baton to move the rest of their prisoners into the simulated holding cells. Only Sisko and the 3 Cardassians stood outside the force field, sealing the cells. Terrell lifted her wrist communicator. This is Terrell. 4 to beam out. Energize.